Hello, everyone. It's me again. If you can take your seats when you get a chance, we'll go ahead and proceed here. That means you, Kelly. And ladies and gentlemen, John Zarella had to take a little break, so they got the second best guy up here. I hope everyone's enjoyed their dinner and they're having a great time. Before I get into something else here, I want Charlie from Valkyrie, our sponsor. I know he's a really awesome guy because a while ago he said, all y'all. And I actually knew what he meant. Most of you guys may not know what he meant, but I know what y'all means. And thanks, Charlie, again for being a great sponsor for us. Well, folks, on a more somber note, I'd like to ask each of you to pause with me as we reflect on those who are no longer with us. In the past year, this nation and the space community at large have lost several of its finest. Jim McDivitt, Gemini 4, and Apollo 9. Don Lynn, STS-51 Bravo. Walt Cunningham, Apollo 7. And Hugh Harris, the voice of NASA. Sam Durrance, STS-35 and STS-67. These gentlemen supported the many efforts put forth to aid the United States in retaining its position of leadership and innovation, and their legacy continues to inspire the next generation in STEM. It is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's next presenter. He is a veteran of 4 space flights and a former NASA administrator. My pleasure, Charlie Bolden. Please come on up. You know, even after you're a NASA administrator, you kind of still, I guess you get a job somewhere.
It says, Charlie bringing remarks. Justine, where are you? In the back. Okay. First of all, off script, this is a fundraiser. Like F-U-N-D, funds, because we provide scholarships, and they are really critical. And if you have not had an opportunity to talk to any of the scholars tonight, please try to find them. Did we have them stand up before? We did? What, can I get them to stand up again? Would all the scholars stand up? Okay, so the purpose of me doing that was so you will know who they are, so you can't say, well, I would have talked to them, but I didn't know who they were. So now you do. So now, back to what I'm supposed to do. And it's a pleasure for me to be here this evening, and I hope all of you are enjoying the evening as we celebrate Senator Mark Kelly and Major General Roy Bridges having been inducted into the Astronaut Hall of Fame. This is a fun night. It really is. It should be. So if I get too heavy, somebody yell and scream and say, get off. Okay. like my friend and astronaut, and I'm going to call my classmates ASCANs because we were at one time. And for those of you who weren't here the other night, ASCANs are astronaut candidates, okay? And that is a term we endear. So we don't mind being called that then, not now. But like my friend and ASCAN classmate Dave Leesma shared with you in his introduction of Roy this afternoon at the induction ceremony, what a blessing for me personally to be selected for the NASA astronaut class of 1980 and to become a classmate of Roy Bridges, an extremely smart and studious graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, class of 1965. Roy always had an infectious smile, and along with his devoted late wife, Benita, they both seemed to lift the spirits of everybody in our class whenever we gathered for social activities. Roy would eventually realize his dream of flying in space when he launched as the pilot of STS-51F in Challenger on July 29, 1985. It would be quite a memorable flight, and that is an understatement. Quite a memorable flight, having experienced a pad abort, the first pad abort where all 3 engines started at about T-minus 3 seconds on the first launch attempt on July 12th, and then experiencing a main engine shutdown just over 5 minutes into the ascent. This resulted in Roy and his crew having to execute an abort to orbit to get the shuttle safely into space, though in a much lower orbit than planned. This would be the first and only time this type of abort would be done in the 135 flight history of the space shuttle. We can probably all imagine, how would we have reacted had we been in this situation? But Roy's immediate reaction, like all pilots, was to announce to his crew, I didn't do anything. I didn't shut down that engine. Always adventurous, never one to be deterred by challenge or failure, Roy's life was filled with overcoming adversity. Now the author of a new book, and I highly recommend this book, An Improbable Astronaut, How a Georgia Farm Boy Wound Up Flying the Space Shuttle. Roy has documented for us his own story of his incredible life and provided a perfect source for introductory material. So anybody who's asked to be a presenter in the future, try to find somebody who's written a book and use it. In the book's publisher's note, his publisher, Lisa Norman, wrote, and I quote, Roy worked to make life better for others, focusing on dignity for those around him. And everybody who worked for Roy, whether in the Air Force or NASA, will tell you that's Roy Bridges. That is Roy Bridges. She continued, Roy's story would not be Roy's story without Roy's family. You heard, those of you who were here this afternoon heard him talk, and most of his talk, was constantly referencing his family. In an endorsement for Roy's book, Roy's Air Force Academy classmate and our ASCAN classmate, John Blaha, wrote, I think the book is an excellent book about challenges, leadership, and overcoming challenges, both in NASA and in the Air Force. An incredible read. And when John and I were talking, he says, Roy was not known as an athlete. He was always really, really serious. Roy grew up in Lithonia, Georgia, a rural community outside Atlanta, after living the first 5 years in the home of his grandfather, as Roy used to call him, Grandpappy Bridges, who was a doctor, and grandmother, Granny Rose, with his mother, Elizabeth, his father, Roy, and his young sister at the time, Eva Mae, who we unfortunately lost in 2021. And that was before Nancy, I know you're here, so that was before baby sister Nancy was born. In talking about his everyday life, Roy says in the preface to his book, from a young age, I wanted to pursue a life of adventure. When I was 5 years old, I searched for a buried treasure. And he always had to drag Eva Mae around because, she was his younger sister. And we hunted for bears in the woods near our home with my cap pistol. He credits his family from his parents and grandparents to his numerous relatives with helping shape him into the man he became. The back cover of An Improbable Astronaut further captures the essence of Roy Bridges when it's written, from fearlessly hunting bears in the woods with his cap pistol at age 5, to piloting a fighter jet in Vietnam in his 20s, to rocketing into space at 42, he quietly, diligently, and relentlessly made his dream a reality. Fueled by ambition and hard work, fed by the support of a family, and formed by the wisdom and character of their example, he made his way from humble beginnings to positions of leadership and prestige, and followed his dream by flying into space as the pilot of the Challenger space shuttle, a classic American dream of our times. Roy, a longtime friend of yours and one of your former deputies during your tenure here as director at the John F. Kennedy Space Center. And Joanne will remember some of this because she and I talked a little bit about you earlier when Joanne reemphasized the fact that Roy all of a sudden became a runner here. But Jim said, he said again, you were always a very serious person. As I remembered you from our time together in the astronaut office, you know, you had crazy people like Hoot and me and our STS-61C crew who ran all the time. We were crazy about it. I didn't recall you being particularly athletic. But Jim told me that you were quite the runner as the center director here, and he complained, as a matter of fact, that you were incredibly observant on your runs, and that each time you returned to your office, who's laughing over there? Okay, he says every time you returned to your office, you discovered something else around the center that needed to be repaired or upgraded. You were noted for getting things done, a reputation that followed you in your tenure as the director of Langley Research Center. Jim shared with me the wonderful letter you provided for his memory book upon his move to NASA headquarters from KSC. You probably remember Mountaintop Experiences, in which you began, and I quote, "Someone said that you have to experience the valley to know the true joy of being on the top of the mountain, where you can breathe the fresh air and see forever." Mountaintop experiences come from that way of thinking. I have traveled through a few deep valleys with you on the way to some true mountaintop experiences here at the Kennedy Space Center. Let me recall a few of these for your memory book. And he goes on to list both highs and lows of their time here at KSC. Many of you here tonight have been through mountaintop experiences. Many of us have been through those experiences with you, Roy, and we prayed for you and with you in your valley with the losses of Tanya and Benita, who I'm certain both of them are smiling with great pride tonight as you're being honored. You know, Roy, you have frequently been the one who has brought us from our valleys to the mountaintop. I'll leave you with one final message from a special person here tonight, your son, Brian. When I asked Brian for a few thoughts that I could offer to you before turning the mic over to you, Brian sent me the following. I'm extremely proud of my dad for all of his accomplishments in life and I love him dearly. Now I'm gonna cry. With that said, I find it so funny that with all my dad's intense training, all his education, all his knowledge and life experiences, that just the other day, after many tests and fails, my dad had to relent and call out the Geek Squad to get his new desktop printer to work. And then he used the traditional laugh out loud. Love you, Dad, Brian. Roy, congratulations and welcome again to the Astronaut Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, Roy D. Bridges.
Well, Charlie, thank you for your great introduction and your friendship over the years. I enjoyed serving with you at JSC in the class of '80, the no-name class. And I admired your leadership while you were NASA administrator. Also, let me just say it's a huge honor to share the stage tonight with other speakers that have come before Charlie, Scott Kelly, and Mark Kelly. So thank you for allowing me to be here. Well, Charlie gave you some details of my career. Just let me warn you, if you don't want these things spoken in public, don't write them down in a damn book. And I think you can appreciate how much I enjoyed participating in our nation's space program as a result of Charlie's experiences. I mentioned in the book that I was thrilled when I heard about the Sputnik launch while riding with my folks in a car to go visit some relatives. And I said, oh my God, this is the thing. I got to get into this. Well, I didn't say much about this because for a poor Georgia farm boy who lived in a 3-room shack with no indoor bathroom from the 3rd through halfway through my 9th grade, went to school in a 4-room schoolhouse, grades 1 through 8, so two grades per teacher, no indoor facilities. Well, I had good teachers. So I did master what needed to be mastered and went to a little bit better schools in town and halfway through my 9th grade to the 12th grade. Actually had an indoor bathroom, thank God. Well, I started looking around for how can I make this happen? This very improbable thing, as Charlie mentioned in a book by that name. Well, I read this article in the National Geographic that my dad used to get every month and about the new Air Force Academy. I went in and says, Dad, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to go to school here. Ha, ha, ha. You have to get a congressional appointment, and I don't know any congressmen or senators. But he found a way to help me, which was characteristic of my dad. He's an avid newspaper reader, so he'd check the paper for when the congressman would be in town, keep me out of school, dress me in my one suit, drive me down to the only hotel in town, sit in the car and tell me to go cold call the congressman, which is a little intimidating, you can imagine. But we did that 3 or 4 times, and the Congress would always invite me in and kind of got to know me. Now I had to go through all the rest of the application process, letters of recommendation, blah, blah. And I was really worried about my eyes. My mom was a nurse, and she had an eye machine. So by the time I got to the eye test for the academy, I pretty much had that sucker memorized, okay? Well, I did apply and went through all the steps, and I got a call one day from the post office, come up here and pick up this registered letter. So I was a little worried about what would be in that letter, but I went up there and picked it up, opened it up while in the post office, and floated out the door because I'd been accepted as a member of the class of 1965. So, of course, Yuri Gagarin flew in April before I graduated in May, and Alan Shepard rocketed to the edge of space in the month I graduated. So this was an exciting time in the beginning of our human space program. And I was just thinking, wow, I kind of got through the first doorway. Now I just got to make this thing work. Well, thankful for all those good teachers. I got a good engineering education at the academy and managed to compete successfully for a scholarship to Purdue University to get a master's in astronautics. My roommate was John Blaha, right down here in front. And the neat thing about that, I could go directly to pilot training instead of having to serve a directed duty assignment in engineering. So John and I were both roommates out at pilot training. Had a miserable beginning. I was just the most awful pilot to begin with. Got 9 straight fares and got put up for a washout check ride. Well, I had kind of a screamer young civilian instructor that gave me those 9 fares, and the guy that gave me the check ride was a crusty old major who was in charge. And all he said during the whole flight, he told me in the pre-flight briefing what he would see me do, and he didn't say another word until we landed. He walked in and gave me an excellent, and I didn't look back. Managed to graduate high enough to get one of the few single-seat fighters, and while at Purdue, met my lovely wife, Benita. And fortunately, she went back to her hometown in Tucson. I was going to pilot training near Phoenix, so spent a lot of weekends down there. Well, F-100 pilots, which is what I was, guess what, guy? You're going to Vietnam right after I finished advanced training. Well, I thought I was being pretty selfish to ask Benita to marry me before going off for a year in Vietnam. Let me tell you, she was pissed. And she pretty much told me so, okay? She had this contract with God that I was going to be just fine and come home, and she was really irritated that I couldn't make any commitments. So I bought a ring. And after graduation, we got married. Well, surviving in Vietnam for 226 missions, many of them over North Vietnam, was let me just say, exciting. I came pretty close to not making it many times, but I did. Thank you. And I was really irritated by my assignment out of Vietnam because I wanted to go to Europe and fly F-100s because I thought that would be the best way to enhance my resume to get to test pilot school, which I wanted to go to next. I even put a sign on my trailer that said the Air Force sucks. Because they were sending me to fly T-37s in Oklahoma. Well, some of my superiors didn't waste much time taking my sign down. And I went ahead and applied to test pilot school before I left Vietnam, and then the amazing thing is the people that went to Europe flying F-100s, which is what I'd wanted to do, were getting 10, 15 hours a month. I was flying 4 times a day. So I amassed a minimum number of hours to get into test pilot school in a year and a half, and was the youngest person at the time to go to test pilot school. Well, because I had the good academics, I could spend a lot more time getting ready for my flights, at the academy and Purdue. So I managed to graduate number 1 out of the test pilot school after my sorry beginning at flying, and got the 1 assignment to Edwards Air Force Base, which is where they test new airplanes, and was lucky enough to be assigned to the AX Test Force, which we did a fly-off between A9 and A10. And then I stayed on for several years developing the A10, and I was the first Air Force pilot to fly the production model, which was a real honor. And then I went to the command and staff, and after that you typically get a staff assignment. I went to the Pentagon, and while there I was the A-10 program element monitor, trying to get the Air Force to give us some money for A-10s and what we needed. Of course, the guys buying F-15s and F-16s said, hey, if we give a nickel to the A-10, that's a nickel we won't have. So it was a pretty tough deal. After doing that for a while, though, I had the distinct honor of being invited to be a traveling assistant for Lieutenant General Stafford, who was one of the best bosses I ever had. Thank you, General Stafford. Well, I had applied for the 1978 astronaut class. I got accepted for an interview and trip down to JSC, had a good time, thought I'd done well. But I was notified by the head of the personnel department, human resources, so I knew the news wasn't going to be too good, and it wasn't. And so I was thought, since I was in this desk job for the next 2 years before the 80 class was selected, that, you know, my resume had not been enhanced by being in a desk job. So I decided, well, I just won't apply. I get this call from the Military Personnel Center, and we can't find your application. You applied last time, got selected to go down there. Why didn't you put one in? I said, well, I didn't think they liked me enough. Plus, I hadn't been doing much except, you know, a desk job. Well, they said, you ought to rethink that. So I went in and talked to General Stafford and asked him what he thought, and he said, yeah, Roy, I think you ought to give it another try. So I went home that night and I erased the date on my previous application and sent it in and got selected. So I'm glad I took your advice, General Stafford. Well, it was pretty great to be at JSC. We were the guys that sat in the back of the room and kept our mouth shut early on because we were way back in line as far as getting a flight. This was, of course, before STS-1. But I had a lot of interesting jobs supporting the early flights, and one day I got called over to George Abbey's office, and he says, Roy, I don't know why I called you over here. I know you're really, really, really busy. Why don't you just go back over to the office? I'm sorry I wasted your time. I said, George, give me a shot at it. I think I can work out something. What do you need? He says, well, Dave Griggs is supposed to be the pilot on STS-51F, but his earlier flight has slipped, and he can't train with the crew. So would you like to be the pilot on that flight? George, yes. I would love to be the pilot. Well, that flight was Space Lab 2, so we had a payload bay full of telescopes and other science experiments. It was very interesting to get ready for. As Charlie mentioned, we went down on July the 12th, my wife's birthday. I was supposed to light her candles with that rocket, and it shut down about 3 seconds before launch, automatic shutdown. Gordo, when he looked over at me after the engine shut down, I saw him looking at my hands. I said, Gordo, I didn't touch a thing. Well, we had some other excitement going uphill, as you heard, after we'd passed the last chance to land at our transatlantic abort site in Zaragoza. We lost one of the engines, and there's no doubt when you lose an engine going uphill, let me tell you, you don't need any warning bells or anything. So Challenger Houston abort to orbit. So we went through our procedures, and then a little later on, we got this call, Challenger Houston limits to inhibit. Now, we had never used that in a simulation before, and it turned out that our person on the booster console by the name of Jenny Howard had noticed another engine with the same failure mode in its sensors as the one that failed. And fortunately, was able to talk the flight director into letting us use this switch to shut down all the engine safety systems. And as a result, we made it to orbit. But along the way, there was a little story here, because we were the first to fly this high inclination orbit. Most had gone 28 and a half. We were 49 and a half because of our science payload. we didn't have a downrange abort site, so after talking to my commander and everything, I went to the lead flight director and I said, hey, flight, I need you to authorize some simulator time so we can qualify a downrange abort site. He said, why in the hell would you want to do that? And I said, well, if we lose the second engine before single engine press to MECO, you know, we need a place to land because the one that's currently being used won't work. Well, that's an unrealistic failure mode. Get the hell out of my office. Quit wasting my time. So I went to the simulator anyway. I qualified Suda Bay Naval Air Station on the island of Crete. And I had the hexadecimal code written on my knee pad when we launched. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I really do not want to have to use this. It's nighttime and they don't know we're coming. And the flight director doesn't even know that I got the code to put in to get there. Well, after we landed from the flight, because everything did go well, we even got a one-day extension, I ran into the flight director one day in the hallway, just one-on-one, and I told him the story. And we both got a belly laugh out of that. So you can laugh about things that end well. Well, after that flight, I knew before landing that I already had a second flight. It was to be a launch in May of '86 with the shuttle Centaur, which is a new high-energy upper stage for a big payload going into polar orbit around the sun. And the payload was problematic. John Young used to call it the Death Star. So we were working hard to get this thing integrated and get all the procedures squared away and everything. And I was in a flight rules meeting one morning in January of '86, and we took a break from the meeting to watch the launch of Challenger, and of course, it didn't make it to orbit. Very, very sad day. And the meeting never resumed. So, of course, my flight was canceled, and I got involved in killing Centaur, which we were successful in doing because now we had time to do something that would be a little more suitable for the shuttle. And with my second mission being canceled, in addition, I was working on return to flight activities, and I got this call from the Military Personnel Center one day, and he says, hey, Roy, you're going to have hundreds of airplanes and people working for you, and blah, 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 blah. Hey, wait a minute. This is Roy Bridges. Are you sure you got the right number? Oh, we want you to be the wing commander at Edwards for the flight test wing. Well, I can't do that. I'm too busy here. So thank you. Goodbye. Well, they called a few more times. I said no. They said yes. And I was on spring break with my kids visiting their grandparents in Arizona when I get a call from Admiral Truly, who's now at the headquarters running the shuttle program. And he says, Roy, I went to the social last night, and I ran into this 4-star Air Force general, and he took a bite out of my ass. He said, you've got 100 astronauts and no shuttles to fly for a couple of years. And we just want this one guy, Bridges, to be our wing commander. So Truly says, Roy, it sounds like a pretty fun job. Why don't you go do that for a couple of years, and you want to get back in line, we'll make it happen. Yes, sir. So that's how I found in May of '86, being at a change of command to run the flight test wing at Edwards Air Force Base instead of flying a shuttle Centaur flight. And, you know, I love being a test pilot, don't get me wrong, and this was a very nice job, but it just wasn't on my bucket list at the time. You know, I'd always wanted to be an astronaut, and so I kind of wanted to continue doing that. Plus, I knew how to be a test pilot, but I sure as hell didn't know how to be the boss of test pilots. So that was going to take a little bit of work. Well, everything worked out pretty well. And after a couple of years, they offered me the opportunity to go to Patrick Air Force Base in Cape Canaveral to run the Eastern Space and Missile Center, launching rockets for the national security organizations and supporting the space shuttle with range and support services, which was a great job. After several more assignments, one of which was being the center commander at Edwards Air Force Base, where we developed some great airplanes like the B-2, C-17. I retired from the Air Force after 31 years and took a couple of months off, but I knew with $4,000 in my savings account, I could not work. So I started looking for a job. I figured in private industry, but then I got a call from NASA, hey, would you like to be the center director at the Kennedy Space Center? What, are you kidding me? Yes. So I submitted my application, went for the interview, and was actually hired and went down there March of '97. And was there for 6.5 years while NASA was doing some really neat things with the space shuttle, processing and testing the International Space Station, and we even talked them into moving the Expendable Launch Vehicle program to KSC. And yeah, I know I hear somebody that's currently running that program today. Well, after being at KSC for a while, and I had a great team doing some great things, due to no fault of their own, we lost Columbia, a real tragedy. And I got a call after the accident boards had finished doing their work from the administrator, and he says, Roy, get your ass up to Langley Research Center, and I want a NASA Engineering and Safety Center set up in 3 months. And this was to cure some of the problems that were common to both Challenger and Columbia. So I went up there, and I had the good fortune to have known 2 people from KSC that would be great in that job. Ralph and Lisa Rowe. Ralph be the head of the NASA Engineering Safety Center, and Lisa to be my deputy. Gotten to know them well here, and they took a chance on me in going up there. Ralph did a great job setting up the NESC. This was to be kind of the final authority for engineering and safety issues. They had enough budget to hire the best in the government, industry, or academia to do deep dives into these problems and recommend fixes. The first 10 years of their existence, they did over 500 of these deep dives, and I'm sure that's helped NASA programs be successful. Well, after being there a couple of years and getting all that done, Lisa Rowe took over as the center director from the deputy position, and I went to work for Northrop Grumman, where I won't go into a lot of detail, but for 13 years, I still had chances to contribute to our space program. For example, one of my contracts was at Wallops Island, where we built and launched sounding rockets for NASA and the Navy. And now I want to just say that I would not be on this stage were it not for the teams that I worked with in the Air Force, in NASA, and in Northrop Grumman. And I know there are many of them in the audience tonight. Ralph and Lisa Rowe could not be here, but there are many others. And what I would like to do now is to have anybody that worked on a team with me in the Air Force, NASA, or Northrop Grumman, and there are some of those here too. Please stand. Thank you. I have many good memories of working with you, and I think together we got a few good things done for the nation. Well, I've got just a couple things I want to go over here at the very end. First, I want to thank the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation for paving the way for many young people to obtain a STEM education. They are our future. Second, I want to thank members of my family in attendance here tonight for joining me in celebrating the honor that you are bestowing on me. As was mentioned, I did lose my wife, Benita, last July after 55 wonderful years together. She fought a valiant 2-year battle against cancer. She was extremely supportive of me during my career, never objecting to my rather hazardous occupational pursuits or the many moves a spouse has to make with the family of an Air Force officer. She was a loving wife, mother, and grandmother, and I would not have been successful without her. Finally, I want you to know that I enjoyed pursuing the career that I dreamed about as a kid. It was an improbable dream. Of course, if I had not pursued it with every bit of energy that I possessed, it would not have happened. I say to every one of you that if you have a dream job in mind, to just go for it. Yes, it'll take a lot of hard work and good luck, as well as a lot of support from family, teachers, mentors, and team members to be successful. But first, you must go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Now let me introduce our next presenter. He has logged 520 days in space on 4 space flights and currently holds the record for the longest time in orbit by a U.S. astronaut. He also happens to be our inductee's twin, Scott Kelly. Scott?
Is that Kurt? No heckling. So I'm not an ambassador, nor do I hold the record for the longest space flight for an American. That is now Mark Vande Hei. But appreciate that, John. Thank you. First of all, I want to say congratulations to Major General Bridges. This is quite an honor and long time coming for you. I also want to thank my family that is here, my friends, and all of Mark's friends and crewmates that showed up. So I've been waiting 54 years, 2 months, 16 days, about 11 hours and 2 minutes for this moment. You might ask why 54 days and not, or 54 years and not 59 years. Well, it's because of this one thing. My first clear memory of my brother, Mark, was our first day of kindergarten. And I'm not sure if he remembers this, but I do. I was sick and I couldn't go. And he goes off to kindergarten, and I was so jealous of him. And when he comes home, he tells me about how they had this fire drill. And during the fire drill, they were running down the hall with axes and hoses, and they were fighting these fires. And I waited a whole year for the next fire drill. And when it happened, man, I was angry. And I'm still angry to this day about that. So, this is actually my moment of revenge. Actually, to be honest with you, I did have a speech planned that was, a bunch of jokes and throwaway lines at my brother's expense. But I decided to get rid of those, and I wrote a new speech on the bus coming over here. I apologize to the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation for them not having any idea what I'm going to say. I understand they're very nervous, and I might take longer than 9 minutes. What I just want to do is tell you about the man that I've shared my whole life with, from my very earliest memories, and shared this extraordinary journey that this country has provided us and the privilege that they've provided. We were born in New Jersey in 1964. My earliest memory of Mark was, like I said, that firefighter story. And we were the best of friends and the worst of enemies. We would beat the crap out of each other, and these fights would last all day because we were so equally matched. We had one rule, actually two rules: no punching in the face and no weapons. But like I said, we were also the best of friends and fiercely defended one another. When we turned 15 years old, this fighting just stopped miraculously. I don't know exactly how, but it did. We were both risk takers as kids. We were actually sort of hellions a little bit. I think if you asked anyone that grew up with us, they would probably agree. We were risk takers, but it was often Mark who got injured, and it was never me for some weird reason. And I was always so jealous of him because he would get all this attention when he was in the hospital, got hit by a car, broke his arm. I watched it snap in half as he was sliding down this railing, got shot in the foot by a BB gun, almost lost his foot, actually, because my mother made the doctor remove the BB, and he didn't want to do it. But I remember the doctor coming out of the operating room and said, well, we got the BB, but he might lose his foot. And he was on crutches the whole summer. Even when he was 50 years old. One day I'm driving by Clear Creek High School, and I noticed my niece Claudia pole vaulting. She was on the pole vaulting team. And I actually thought to myself, I better call my brother and tell him that if he sees her pole vaulting, don't go over there and pole vault, because I actually thought about doing it. And then I thought better of it. A couple weeks goes by, and he's in the emergency room with a snapped bicep tendon because he was trying to pole vault at high school at around 50 years old. And like I said, I was always so jealous because whenever he was in the hospital, I would have to go to our uncle who lived next door and have liver and onions for dinner, which I hated. Our dad was a police officer. One of these very stereotypical Irish cop guys you'd see on TV. Once a year he'd come home with a cast on his fist and tell my brother Mark and I how he broke his fist fighting crime, right? Years later we learned there was a lot more bar fighting going on than crime fighting. And we didn't have a whole lot of money when we were young. We were actually, probably considered a working poor family, and my parents did not have the best relationship. It was often, up to us to defend our mother from him. And it wasn't until my mother became a cop that our economic situation got better at about 13 years old. But our, home situation really didn't get that much better, and we, continued to be between my mom and my dad. And I think this really negative experience at a young age, when you look back on it in retrospect, had a really positive impact on my brother's character, which is a desire to protect and stand up for the vulnerable people that cannot stand up for themselves. We were both really bad students until at some point When we went to high school, he started getting straight A's. And I just continued meandering on this, this path, not quite failing, but certainly not excelling. I asked him a few years ago, I said, what happened? How did you do that? And he says, you don't remember when our dad sat the two of us down and explained that we were going to go to a vocational school because we were such bad students, and that's what inspired him to do better? I was like, no. I don't remember that at all. Probably only because there was a squirrel running outside the window. Had it not been for that squirrel, I'm pretty sure I would have went to Harvard. Yeah, we worked as volunteer EMTs on an ambulance crew in our hometown, and also a paid job that we got at 17 years old in a major, not major city, but a city, Orange, New Jersey, very urban place. And I think the only reason we got that job is because our dad twisted the guy's arm of the guy who managed the place and forced him into it. But that was pivotal for us, I think, in dealing with, learning how to deal with very, very stressful situations. I was so proud of him when he went into the Navy and got his wings, Navy wings. He was wound up being a year in front of me because of that squirrel. But I was also a little bit jealous. But then my jealousy turned to embarrassment when he got picked to fly the A6E Intruder. Such an ugly airplane, right? It's so ugly that the Navy calls it the double ugly. Now, Mark served in the first Gulf War, flying more than 30 combat missions, and again, I was very jealous of him as I watched the war from my couch in Virginia Beach. We both became test pilots at the same time. Actually, we didn't apply to the same test pilot school class because he was in postgraduate school, and then I applied to TPS. I wanted to go to the postgraduate school, but I didn't get selected because I guess I didn't have good enough academic background. But in any case, we wound up in the same TPS class, which was an incredible privilege, like many of the privileges I've had and we've had in our lives. Let me tell you a little bit about the type of pilot he is. At TPS, you can do, or as a test pilot, you do these things called quali-vals, qualitative evaluations, where you go fly an airplane you're not familiar with as a way to just get some extra skill and experience and understand the flying qualities and performance of a different airplane. So one day we went flying in the A6. We went down to Oceana. I was in the right seat and then did the simulator there. And then we swapped the next day, and I flew back in the left seat, and he flew back in the right seat. Allowed me the chance to see exactly how ugly the A6 was, and also its flying qualities and performance. And we did the same thing in the Tomcat. We flew down to Oceana and did the simulator, and then the next day, he jumps in the F-14 for the very first time, and on our way back, he says to me, he goes, something like, man, the stick forces are really heavy. I think the trim isn't working. And there was this emergency boldface procedure that you had to pull this very obscure circuit breaker really fast to stop this runaway trim. Well, I guess I didn't tell him that. And by the time I did in the airplane, it was too late. And I'm in the back seat. He's in the front. He's got this, probably about 50 pounds of stick force that he has to hold against as we're flying back to Pax River from Oceana. It's probably about a 30-minute flight. So we go out into the warning area and climb up above, 10,000 feet, put the airplane in landing configuration. His arm's getting tired. I think he was holding it with his knee for a while. Couldn't, hold that force for so long. And so we're going to see how it flies and what would happen if he lets go of the stick and the airplane just squatted right into a deep stall. So the only time he's ever landed the F-14 is one of these very, very serious landing emergencies, and it was a perfect landing. We both got selected, like it was mentioned, in the same astronaut class. Again, an incredible privilege for the both of us. He'll mention, I'm sure, something about him getting picked first or selected first, but I just want to point out that he actually applied twice as compared to me. He flew in space 4 times. His first flight, kind of more of a vanilla space station resupply mission, but his last 3 were some of the most challenging flights of the space shuttle era. You know, STS-121 is his second flight as a pilot, a return to space mission. His third flight was STS-124, which took the biggest module ever to the International Space Station, probably one of the heaviest ever flown in the payload bay, certainly the largest. And his final flight was STS-134, which flew the alpha magnetic spectrometer, certainly the most expensive payload ever. I actually thought I had this record over him, where when I was the commander of 118, I actually got to fly the whole stack with the rotational hand controller, so the space shuttle and the International Space Station all together, you know, controlling its attitude with a pilot in the loop. But he recently told me he had done that in 134, so I guess that wasn't quite the accomplishment I thought I had, because the space station was much bigger at the time. You know, he's one of just a handful of astronauts to visit the space station on 4 different occasions. And in between those flights, he was the astronaut office rep for, you know, new vehicles, advanced projects, really a thankless job that he devoted an incredible amount of energy for, because every time you'd get a new Congress or a new president, that plan would get canceled and they'd move on to something else. But of course, the biggest challenge of Mark's life was, without a doubt, when Gabby was shot on January 8th, 2011 in Tucson, Arizona. 6 people killed, including a 9-year-old little girl, Christina Taylor Greene, who was there to meet her congresswoman, my sister-in-law, Gabby. It was a tough time for him and I. I was on the space station when this happened, and I would call Mark like every day for weeks to check in on Gabby and see how he was doing. And eventually, I realized that our calls kind of switched from me trying to be there for him to him trying to be there for me. Because I was, you know, secluded there on the space station with very little control of what was going on Earth. There's a great story I heard. I don't know if he told me this or someone else told me. Certainly wasn't him, but someone else told me. In the early days of Gabby's treatment, he was in a room with a bunch of trauma surgeons, neurologists, brain surgeons, and they were trying to come up with a plan on how to treat Gabby. And he noticed that there were a group of people in the back of the room that weren't really participating in the discussion. Looked like doctors, and he asked them who they were. And they said they were a bunch of interns. And he tried to include them in the discussion, like, are we doing the right thing? What do you think? You know, I want to know everyone's opinion. You know, even on his shuttle cruise, one of his shuttle crews told me one time that he said to them, he goes, it is a requirement that if you think I am making the wrong decision, that you question it. I want you to question everything I do. That's the type of leader he is. You know, he's one of the most objective people I've ever met that will not look at issues with emotion, but with facts and data to find solutions, to be inclusive of everyone, and to value their opinion. You know, this and a lifetime of extraordinary accomplishments in public service is why our country is so lucky to have this man serving as a U.S. Senator. You know, I asked some of our high school friends about some memories of Mark and how, you know, maybe some comments I could use from that time of him as a kid. And they told me 2 things that he used to say. One is that he was going to be the first person to walk on Mars. And that ain't going to happen. But he also said he was going to be the President of the United States someday. And that, unlikely, but still possible. You know, as we're quickly approaching our 6th decade of life, and I reflect back on the privileges I've had and the incredible things I've gotten to do, the highlight of it was that I was able to share it with my brother Mark. I'm also reminded of him often when I'm in my house, in my bedroom, and I walk by Amico's full-length mirror, and I see what his near 60-year-old flabby ass looks like. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. But please welcome my brother Mark. I am proud to call him my brother. Thank you. Now get your flabby ass up here. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. You might have noticed we didn't shake hands. We definitely don't hug. It's just like kind of it's a weird twin thing. We just don't do that. Gotta find my speech. Mine will not be 20 minutes, like my intro. Yes, you should clap for that. Because there's a lot of cool stuff to look at in this building, and I hope everybody had the opportunity to go down and see the lunar lander. If nobody told you, this is a Saturn V rocket that you are sitting beneath. Apollo service module over there. A lot of cool stuff. But I want to first say, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, and esteemed colleagues, especially my crew members from my 4 space shuttle flights who are here, Dan Tanny, Mike Fossum, Garrett Reisman, Karen Nyberg, Greg Johnson, Ron Guerin, and then the other person that I flew in space with, which is Katie Coleman. Thank you for being here. And Gabby, Claudia, Claire, Scott, what a great introduction. That last thing you said, I was not expecting. I do remember the kindergarten thing, and I still laugh that you believe that. Pretty much, I think about it once a year. But it's truly an honor to be inducted into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame today, and General Bridges, congratulations to you. But let me start out by saying to the Astronauts Scholarship Foundation that runs this thing that I'm disappointed. On February 21st, 1964, I showed up in the world a full 6 minutes ahead of him. My brother, or as I like to refer to him, the cheap copy. 18 years later, I was commissioned into the United States Navy a full year earlier. I graduated from college first, and grad school for that matter. I got my Navy wings first, landed on an aircraft carrier first. And to you Air Force guys out there, yes, that's a big deal. I interviewed to be an astronaut, yes, first, and then got that phone call from Dave Leesma before he did. By the way, nobody has ever given me a straight answer if they made the twins astronauts just so they could experiment on us later. But joke's on you. And I even departed the astronaut office before Scott did. But somehow you managed to put him into the Astronaut Hall of Fame before me. A full 2 years before me. What happened? If you're wondering, yes, this is a competition. Like the whole thing. All kidding aside, I want to congratulate my brother Scott for his induction 2 years ago. We each flew 4 space missions, 4. But when you compare my personal sacrifice in doing this job to his, I mean, there really is no comparison. I mean, Scott spent nearly, get this, nearly 10 times the amount of time in space that I did. 520 days. And one of his flights was a year long, and I know that was not easy. Believe me, I know.
But meanwhile, after 4 trips to space on 2 different space shuttles, traveling 20 million miles, orbiting the Earth 854 times, the thing I'm most well known for is being the guy who sent a gorilla suit into space. And as I stand before you, I really can't help but reflect on my own journey from being a Navy pilot to an astronaut and everything in between that has led up to this moment. 4 space missions, 2 as the commander of the space shuttle. It really is the American dream. And it was only possible because we were born in this great country. And I had the chance in this job to learn from just some of the best. My first commander on STS-108, Dom Gorey, and on my second flight, Steve Lindsay, 2 of the best shuttle commanders who ever climbed into the left seat of the orbiter. Thank you, they're not here, but thank you for teaching me how to do that job. So, a space mission is like a child. Hard to decide who is your favorite, and then it's much harder to say it out loud. Claudia and Claire. They're my daughters. Claudia and Claire, if you're wondering, I'll admit that Claire, you are my favorite younger daughter. And Claudia, you are my favorite older daughter. But Sage is definitely my favorite grandchild. For me, though, I'd say, that first opportunity to command the space shuttle in STS-124 and bring up that Japanese laboratory to the space station was just the best. It really was. It was a new job for all of us. There were 5 rookies on the flight, and me and Mike Fossum. It was an international partner. It was a heavy payload. And it was really going to significantly increase the size and capability of the space station. And it went extraordinarily well. My last flight was a lot harder. Gabby had recently been shot, and we had so much to deal with. Even the decision to take part in this mission was really tough. She was still in the hospital when we launched and when we landed, and she was in the operating room getting brain surgery during the rendezvous and docking. It was an exercise in compartmentalization for me, and I couldn't have done it without a crew who was very competent and also understanding. So I want to take a moment just to say how grateful I am to them and the NASA community, including Peggy Whitson, who was the chief of the astronaut office at the time, for helping me get through this and allowing me to finish what I started. There's a moment that I'm going to always hold on to. After a few days in quarantine, we were allowed to see our spouses at the beach house the day before the scheduled liftoff. If you haven't been there, it's about 3 or 4 miles down the road here on the ocean. And for those who are familiar with these reunions, you understand it's an intimate affair. A few astronauts and their spouses going their separate ways to share some final moments before launch in that beach house. But this time it was different. And Gabby came into the beach house in a wheelchair, accompanied by her mom, her chief of staff, a nurse, 3 U.S. Capitol police officers, 3 Kennedy Space Center security officers, and my late colleague, astronaut Piers Sellers, who was looking after Gabby during that mission. My crew and their spouses could not have been more understanding and supportive. And with a lot of effort, we got Gabby into the ocean, where Gabby and I were able to be together, just the 2 of us in the water. For months, the 2 of us had been under the brightest of spotlights. But for those moments, standing in the Atlantic Ocean, it all felt so far away. I'm still grateful to my crew and others who made that possible. During the most difficult period of my life, I saw the best in NASA. So it's been a wild ride. But you know what they say? What goes up must come down. And for me, that was the United States Senate. You know, I got a lot of encouragement from my astronaut colleagues to continue my service in the Senate. And I really appreciate every one of them that encouraged me to do this. But I got to tell you, there might not be an organization that is as different from NASA than the U.S. Senate. Science, data, and facts, all three are somewhat fluid concepts. They're optional. And after having spent 54 days in space floating in a vacuum, now on a lot of days I speak into one. So it was a bit of an adjustment. I mean, I serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I'm the chair of the Air-Land Subcommittee. You know what that means? I'm in charge of the Army and the Air Force. A guy who spent 25 years in the Navy. It's the best. I'm also one of only 3 engineers in the Senate. And while I don't serve on the Commerce Committee that has jurisdiction over NASA, I do spend a lot of time on our space program. As you might imagine, I get a lot of questions from my colleagues on what we should or shouldn't do with programs that affect NASA and that affect science and space. Some of them might alarm you. So if you have any ideas, what we should or shouldn't be doing in space, feel free to reach out to my office, and I'm serious about that. I mean, we're always looking for, help in finding the right path. And now in the decade since I left NASA, we've made some really great strides in space, a lot of progress. We've got commercial crew and cargo programs launching American astronauts and payloads, again from American soil, on American rockets. And SpaceX is building some really big rockets. Blue Origin's about to do the same thing. And Orion has finally launched on SLS on Artemis 1. And for Artemis 2, NASA selected 2 great Navy pilots, as they should have. And another great American. She wasn't in the Navy. Also a pretty good Canadian. I guess that means we're going to have to see a hockey puck go around the moon. And then we're going to send astronauts back to the surface of the moon. It really is an exciting time for space exploration. But it's also a challenging one. Our partnership with the Russians is tenuous. Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine will continue to affect every aspect of our relationship. Putin and his cronies must be held accountable. They have to be. And I will do everything I can and whatever I can in my position as a U.S. Senator to ensure that they fail in Ukraine. I promise you that. So our challenges as a country are great, and overcoming them, it's not going to be easy. But as I travel around the country, and now in my role as a senator, what I hear over and over and over again is the immense pride that the American people have in our space program. In an era where everything is partisan, the space program isn't. Senators from Ted Cruz to Bernie Sanders are big fans. I mean, NASA is the Dolly Parton of government agencies. I mean, everybody loves Dolly Parton. She gets the highest polling numbers in our country, year after year. And that didn't happen by accident. It wasn't an accident. I mean, this is because you attract the best and brightest of our country, you work hard, and you make good decisions. And you generally don't screw things up. So please, please keep it up. I'll keep supporting the mission and working hard to make sure my Senate colleagues, and this is challenging, I'm going to work hard to make sure my Senate colleagues understand that the space shuttle didn't land on the moon. So thank you so much for this honor. Thank you for everyone who supported me on this journey. And to the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation, I think I did keep it to 7 minutes. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and a big congratulations to Mark Kelly and Rory Bridges, the 2023 United States Astronaut Hall of Fame inductees. As we induct these two astronauts into the Astronaut Hall of Fame, it gives me a moment to reflect on the honor and the important responsibilities that I think is bestowed upon us when we receive this recognition. In 1990, our founding astronauts established the Astronaut Hall of Fame as a place to honor and pay tribute to the very best in our space program and to bring them into the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation family, giving us a mission to carry forward the legacy forged by our founders, the Mercury 7. It is our responsibility to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs, engineers, scientists, and yes, future astronauts. The Hall of Fame brings us all together to lift up our peers, to share stories, and to celebrate our accomplishments. It is a time to honor our moments in American history and to know that we are fueling the work of astronaut scholars to make their own mark in the history books.
I think the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation has a really important role in the future of science and technology in the United States. We recognize young scholars who have great potential for changing the future. There's a quote from E.E. Cummings, and I don't know if I can get it right, that says that we can't believe in ourselves until someone finds something valuable within us. And so I think that we recognize these young folks and believe in them, and so then they can believe in themselves.
When I started off in school, it was hard for me to get resources. I kind of came in late as far as being a Mississippi State student. And ASF was one of the key nonprofits that I scouted out for because of how they reinvest and retain their ASF scholars and their alumni. I got paired with a mentor that's been incredible and continues to be incredible throughout my life and that I can reach out to at any point.
Britton and I talk about lots of different stuff. And so that offers me the opportunity to just interject little pieces of information, of wisdom maybe, and see how he reacts, how he picks up on it, how he interprets it. And mentoring is simply one leg of the stool. The way you can learn is by listening to people who have been successful in a field in which you'd like to enter, or in which you'd like to live your life in.
Mentorship is one of those things that some people don't realize is as important as it is. Like nobody can be successful on their own. Everybody I've talked to who's deemed successful, whether that be, in one way or another, they've always had help and mentorship in some way or another. Like I would not be where I am today. I can't even imagine where I would be at today, just because I feel like it'd be so drastic.
The Astronaut Scholarship really brought a few of us high achievers together to push each other to really do the most in our roles and to really accomplish something new and innovate. And that's what the world needs right now. They need innovation and people with the support to push us to the next level.
For me personally, I believe it's incredibly important, but I think it should be important for everybody. to reinvest into the next generation of STEM explorers and scientists.
Promoting excellence in STEM education is really valuable to the United States.
I am kind of embrace the idea of this is a leadership organization for benefiting students, and so it was one reason I've donated to this, and partnerships with universities is very high standards for donating, giving your dollars, my dollars, to the right students that then go on and achieve something important.
Our future depends on the young people who are joining the space program and all the other science and technology programs in the United States. And so we have to invest in them, we have to believe in them.
I couldn't have done this alone. I worked very hard, which was important, but hard work only gets you so far without guidance and mentoring. And for me, that has come from people that I met through NASA, Sierra Space, and ASF especially. I'm grateful to be a part of the ASF family because I feel like I've been given the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of giants. And I hope that one day I can pay it forward by being the shoulders that someone else stands on.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you again for being here this evening. Congratulations to our inductees. We're very proud of you and honored to be able to celebrate with you. And I get the honor to share a little bit about our mission this evening and why it's important. So why is the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation so important? And I got the privilege to go out to Space Symposium a couple weeks ago, which kudos to Space Foundation. I think this is a hard weekend. Oh my goodness, that is a week. And it's a lot of fun, and I know a lot of you were there, and it's a great networking event, and we get a lot out of it when we go. And I dropped in on a panel discussion that Pam Melroy was moderating, getting Moon to Mars strategy. Towards the end of the panel, she asked a very poignant question to the panelists. So what do we need for the future of the space program? And the answer was really consistent across the panel. We need the best and brightest our universities are going to offer. We need subject matter experts, and we need an inclusive environment. And I sat there in this sea of military uniforms and suits and wanted to raise my hand saying, hey, we're doing that. And that is what we're doing. We're identifying the best and brightest for our country to innovate in technology and innovation, to keep the United States at the forefront of everything. That's what we do every day. My team, 11 of us, get up every day and focus on that mission. And we bring you here together to celebrate that. We honor our past to fuel the future. We have that very special opportunity every day. And we think we have a really great impact on our scholars, and they tell us that we do. In fact, one scholar, she's here tonight, one of my favorite things that she says is, there was before the astronaut scholarship and there was after the astronaut scholarship, because it is a life-changing event for them. We've selected 68 scholars for this year. We'll bring them together in August for the Innovators Week in Gala, and they'll have professional development sessions, industry tours, they'll network, they'll meet with their mentors, they'll have all kinds of great interactions, and they'll describe it as life-changing, inspiring. They gain confidence through that. And we're really, really proud that we can have that influence on our scholars. But how are our scholars having an influence on society? Well, that's really immeasurable. I can't describe it to you. It's truly such an enormous impact. But I do have a few fun facts I can share with you. Kurt will be fact-checking me and timing me. I won't take too long, I promise. But our astronaut scholars have, to the best of our knowledge, and our Vice Chair Lisa, scholar alum from very early in our scholar careers, keeps track of this for us. Our scholars have completed over 1,000 bachelor degrees, 268 master degrees, 300 PhDs, and they've published 2,443 technical papers, but who's counting, 161 patents, and last, but certainly not least, we have an astronaut amongst our astronaut scholars. She was 2001-2002 Astronaut Scholar, 2020 Neil Armstrong Award of Excellence, and most recently, Christina Cook was selected for Artemis II. That's pretty cool. So I think we're doing a pretty good job, but I could stand here all day or all night, but I know there's an after party we gotta get to. But we wanna cap off this evening remembering why we're all together, celebrating our past to fuel the future. And I'm gonna turn this over to one of our astronaut scholars from Arizona. I'm not trying to butter you up at all, Mark Kelly. Zachary Schlamowitz.
Well, guys, good evening. Ecstatic to be here, to say the least. But one thing real quick, Mr. Zarella, I think if anybody's an ambassador here, it should be me. And the reason is that they didn't tell me what to tell you guys about tonight. They gave me, maybe a prompt, but they didn't put words in my mouth. And everything I'm about to say to you may sound a little bit like echoes of the things you just heard, but it comes from my heart, and I'm an ambassador for all of the other scholars because most of the things I say are things I have heard from my peers and just went, that was a good idea. So, before I get started, actually, there's something I do need to get off my chest, though. And that's, so I'm a student at the University of Arizona, for all our Arizona people. Bear down, yeah. And last fall, it was about November, I was walking on campus and I see a line of students standing up front of a tent. And I thought, well, usually with a line of students there's free food, so I got in line. But it turns out it was actually free meet Mark Kelly, who was campaigning for his Senate race. And so I got in line and I shook his hand, asked him a quick question about the campaign. He answered it okay. And I was on my way. I mean, there was a lot of people, I had to hurry. So after that I left, I was on my way to class, and I thought, well, I'll text my parents. They'll get a kick out of this. And so I sent a text to my parents. And the first thing my mom says is, well, did you tell him you're an astronaut scholar? And I said, no, Mom. He was busy. It was quick. And she says, go back and tell him you're an astronaut scholar. But at that point, I was, 5 minutes away, and it seemed really difficult. And so I thought, well, I'll just fly out to Florida for Hall of Fame. And so, Mark, where are you? I need you to know on behalf of my mother, I'm an astronaut scholar. But actually, the fact that I was able to just do that little joke, though, is more significant than meets the eye. Because if you stop and think about it, ASF housing both Hall of Fame and the scholarship program is non-trivial. Like, those could easily be separate things under different roofs, and yet they are together in the same foundation. And so that begs the question, well, why? And you could check out probably the history for the real answer, but if you'll bear with me, I think one reason is that we share values. And someone before me just mentioned innovation is a key value, right? I mean, last night with the Skylab talk, we heard crazy stories of innovation. High pressure situations, you have the solar heat shielding, I'm only a scholar, not an astronaut, but the heat shielding coming off of Skylab, and in a matter of days, they had multiple solutions, right? I myself, as a scholar, think I can innovate. I mean, last night I opened my suitcase and realized I'd forgotten to pack pajamas, and so in a matter of minutes, I solved the problem and slept in my underwear. But innovation, though I joke about it, is actually very fundamental to societal progress, which is another value that we share. And I would argue that innovation really is the bedrock. It's the foundation. How do we get society from where we are today to the future? We innovate. I mean, going to space is a very maybe contrived but simple example, right? I mean, we start where we are today, Earth, and progress. I mean, every space mission, the ones that have been and the ones that will be, are progress, right? And we go out and we make our journey to space, but that's only the first part. You see, getting to space is great, but coming back from space, the return journey, the second part of progress, is arguably the more important step. I mean, obviously, for the sake of human life, we need to get the astronauts back from space. But bringing the experience, the gained knowledge, and the power of inspiration of those astronauts back from space to reintegrate with society and inject that inspiration as fuel into the future generations is what makes progress renewable and cyclic. And so I said the word inspiration. I want to draw your attention to, I see there's two types of inspiration that you could think about. One would be seen inspiration, meaning inspiration by something that you see happening and you go, oh, that's really cool. Actually, I should get behind that. But seen inspiration only goes so far. And the second type of inspiration, we might call it type 2 inspiration, is felt inspiration. Inspiration that you experience, that touches you somewhere in here, not just up here. Now, I can open my LinkedIn feed and see what my fellow astronaut scholars are up to, and let me tell you, talk about seen inspiration. I mean, it's like a who's who of the top universities, the top companies to work for. I mean, I am floored every time I open my feed. But that is just seen inspiration. And let me tell you, all of that, whether it's Lockheed Martin, MIT, whatever, pales in comparison to the experience I had meeting my fellow scholars at the Innovators Week that we had last fall, and finding out not only are they real people, believe it or not, they are also great people. I'll say that again, they are great people, and I've had the same experience with the astronauts that I've met through this foundation and incredible experience. And that experience, the talking to people, realizing they are real human beings that you can relate to, the felt inspiration, that is what changes the experience from just being inspired to beginning to believe. We talked just a moment actually ago about belief, and I want to point out that, I mean, I think we probably are all aware the power of human belief really is something to be never underestimated. I mean, we can only do what we believe, and the biggest barrier to what we can't do is what we do not believe we can do, right? And the power, the effect of the felt inspiration of the ASF's events is that it gets us astronaut scholars, who at heart really are a bunch of young kids, to begin to believe. I mean, let me tell you, I don't wake up every morning thinking I can change the world. That may surprise you, but I don't. Maybe on Saturday, but most days I don't. But when I come to an event like this, and I have the tremendous experience of interacting with astronauts and professional affiliates, and all you guys, and I get this implicit exchange that says, you believe I can change the world. Well, hell, who am I to tell you about changing the world? I mean, it conveys this extraordinarily powerful message that takes what would be great potential and moves it to incredible potential. And that's an important word, incredible potential, potential which would otherwise not be credible because we would not believe. That is the return on investment of the astronaut scholarship. Now, I'll note, being able to believe is something that I think is another shared belief between all of us. We heard about Roy Bridges as a little kid with a cap gun hunting bear. I mean, talk about imagination and convincing yourself you can do the incredible. And belief is what takes us, like I said, from the amazing to the incredible. Now, the last thing I want to tell you is that it's probably true, I think I can say this without any qualms, that if you were to take astronaut scholars and not give them the astronaut scholarship, they would do great things. And they may even do incredible things. But just like stars in the night sky take on greater meaning and greater structure when we assign them to constellations, the astronaut scholarship provides a structure, a network that links each of us potential stars together, and it does so in a way that makes us shine even brighter than we would if we were on our own. So, this is this beautiful idea of stars shining bright, but I don't know if Caroline mentioned this. I'm a mathematics student, and for those of you who haven't had the unfortunate experience of talking to mathematicians on a daily basis, we rarely make claims if we don't think we can prove them. So, I'm not going to let you guys let me off the stage without giving you the theorem and the proof. The theorem is that we astronaut scholars shine brighter when we're together, and I'm about to prove it to you. So just in a minute, I'm going to have all of the astronaut scholars in the room come up on stage with me, and I promise you it will be brighter on this stage with them behind me, because together we are no longer individuals who think we can do great things. We are individuals who have had a shared experience, who believe in each other, who who are inspired by each other and inspired by all of you to do incredible things, and we therefore shine bright. So can I have all the astronaut scholars please join me?
I mean, if this isn't a mama bear moment for me. Holy crud, Zach. I'm like about in tears over there, and I don't cry. Ask my family. They're here. I don't cry. Goodness gracious. Look at this. Look at this. This is incredible. So thank you again for being here. I get the privilege of also, because I would never ask a scholar to do this, but we want you to join us in supporting our scholars. We have amazing, amazing people that we are lifting up and supporting every year, right? I know I have scholarship sponsors in the room. If you're a scholarship sponsor, stand up real quick. Let's give you a round of applause. A lot of you, I think, don't actually know your sponsors because, like, Northrop Grumman didn't, I'm saying your name again. You didn't stand up, but you are a sponsor, so. No, it really and truly, we couldn't do it without our supporters. Our scholars are they get up to $15,000 in scholarship funding. They get to come to the Innovators Weekend Gala that Zach mentioned in August. They get paired with mentors. It's just an absolutely phenomenal program. And I'm very, very proud to lead it. I'm very proud that you get to be a small part of it this evening. We're honored to share the floor with our inductees into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame. I really do want to encourage you, please consider making a donation to the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation. Be a part of something special. These are game changers. This is our future. This is the workforce you ask for, the one you tell us you want. We're really trying to get them out there and be there for you and make our country great, make our space program great. So thank you very much. If you need a cheat sheet on how to make a donation, it's on your table. Just scan the QR code, or if you need to, go ahead and swipe that plastic. I'm sure my raffle ticket table will help you out with that. Please give my scholars another round of applause. I'll let them exit the stage. I'll say thank you once again. I'm going to bring back Zarella. He's going to take us to the finish line. We are ready to roll. I think we have some raffle ticket winners to draw as well. And then we're going to head back on those buses, get back to the Hilton Cocoa Beach, have a fun few drinks, because we haven't had enough already. But thank you so much, and good night.
Thank you, dear. Ambassador Zach, where are you? I can't see you from here. Ambassador Zach. Oh, he's over here. Dude, that was good. Really good, dude. And no teleprompter, no script. What the? No, believe me, it's easy. All right. What an amazing, amazing celebration this has turned out to be tonight, as they all are every year. As we are closing out the evening, we would like to thank all of you for being here to help celebrate the achievements of Roy and Mark and to support the amazing astronaut scholars. And if that was not proof enough of how amazing they all are, then there's something wrong.